Good morning, this is 4046. Welcome to my channel. Please like and subscribe. I've been meaning to make this yesterday, but due to work patterns, making videos a bit difficult. As in the last 18 days I've worked 16 out of 2 days, which 16 days out of the 18 and I only had 2 days off, so bear with me. I'm not firing all salvos as I normally might be. I digress. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about the Dwarf. Now, I'm only going to talk about the original first 8 seasons, which you can get on streaming services worldwide, possibly BBC iPlayer, as this is a BBC series. BBC took their reins off of this in 2001 or possibly a little bit later, and sold the rights to UK TV, which, to be fair, is just another division of the BBC. Anyway, those I may cover in a different video because the quality is not as good. They're worth watching apart from Back to Earth. Back to Earth is a mishmash of ideas. And anyway, getting back to the first 8 seasons. The premise of this is the last man in existence 3 million years in the future, through some actions of his own, and finding himself with a mismatch of people and things that I couldn't even imagine to begin with. It's set on a mining vessel called Red Dwarf, hence the name of the series. In the first 2 seasons you have Rimmer, who is played by Christopher Barry, who's a hologram. I'll explain Rimmer in a moment. The cat, which I'll explain again in a moment, and then Dave Lister, which is Craig Charles. Now, Dave Lister committed a crime by bringing an unquarantined cat onto the ship and got put into, in this timeline they have, suspended animation. The first episode, more or less, everyone is alive. So you can see where this might be going. And Lister and Rimmer work together, and they're vending machine repairmen, which I should imagine is probably the most mundane task on something like a spaceship, would assume. Now, Red Dwarf would mine asteroids, etc. Had a full crew of, I believe, over 100 crewmen, and unfortunately Lister and Rimmer found themselves in the captain's office on a regular basis for misdemeanors, shall we say. One of the punishments was to actually go outside the ship and paint the Red Dwarf sign on the side of the ship for X amount of hours or days for an infraction they may have done. Anyway, Lister goes on leave and then brings a cat back with him. He has a romantic interest in the likes of Christina Kachansky, who likes him but is not quite on board, shall we say. Anyway, he gets put into suspended animation because it gets found out about, and he wakes up 3 million years later, and Holly, the ship has another character called Holly, which is the ship's computer, but it also has the face of Norman Lovett, as it happens. and it's designed in the base of humour. It's a comedy which has some points. Unfortunately, is a little bit dated now, but it is definitely worth a watch. If you want to watch things like, I suspect things, just for example, MASH. This is a situation comedy in that vein, and this has a legacy all on its own because it got better and better and better with each season, but it had a fall as well. But anyway, the first two episodes concentrate on Lister coming out of suspended animation. And it takes a while to dawn on him, even though the ship's computer has been talking to him, that everybody's dead, Dave. Everybody's dead. And Dave just keeps naming certain crew members and things like that. And slowly dawns on him because there's just piles of dust everywhere. And then it transpires that due to Rimmer's incompetence, everybody on the ship was basically gone because he was repairing a reactor core seal, and the seal, he didn't do the job properly, so there was a meltdown, more or less, or something along those lines, because it's never clear exactly what it is. Anyway, because Lister's the only one left, the ship steers away from human space, and 3 million years later he wakes up because the radiation levels are safe by that time. The first character he meets is Rimmer. However, in this timeline, Rimmer is a hologram. And the other fact is that Rimmer and Lister didn't particularly get on very well. So Rimmer is always coming out with snarky comments and always wanting to be an officer, but he was never good enough. Because well, if you watch, you'll see exactly what I mean. And then you're joined by the cat, which is Danny John Jules. I think he's been in many things, notable works of Blade 2 and Death in Paradise. They're very, very good. He evolved over the 3 million years from a cat into a humanoid cat. So he's basically the cool one, and it's very good. It's very good. It's basically, they're not heroes in any way, shape or form. Everything that happened, they're victims of circumstance, and some of it is very well written. It really is. Each episode is more or less self-contained, but the overall story is the same thing. This is before story arcs became a major thing, so it was episodic format rather than a story arc. Story arc was obviously returning to Earth, but it's basically somebody dealing with a hopeless situation where most people would try and find a way, but then he tries to find a way to mill away the time because they're 3 million years in the future. There's not really anybody left, so he's dealing with the issues with that, which the cat, being very selfish, tries to help him with, but only in his own little way. And Rimmer just annoys him, but that's just to keep him sane. The whole reason he was assigned Rimmer as a hologram was to keep him sane. Many, many, many different things happen to them, and in season 2, at the very start, you get introduced to the last regular member of the crew, which is Crichton, who is a mechanoid, so basically like an android robot type thing. And look, well, he's a a service mechanoid, which is something that does ironing, washing and cleaning, which they find on a crashed ship, and in series 3 he becomes part of the crew, and then Lister tries to break his programming with teaching him to lie and be dishonest. So that's a whole thing in its own right. They get very many unusual situations. Some notable ones are Better Than Life, where you're in a VR, but you're more or less you're still wearing the VR goggles and everything, but it's a lot more involved than our current ones are, where anything you want can happen, anything you desire can happen. Unfortunately, because Rimmer gets it into his head that only bad things happen to him, it starts corrupting the program, so it all starts to go very wrong and affects the other crew members. He is truly a horrendous individual, because his underachieving and his negligence is terrible, to say the least. Another situation is where a whole planet, like a Madame Tussauds of wax androids, start a war against each other, and Rimmer ends up killing them all. And it just goes to show. I mean, some of his things, those favourite dictators like Napoleon, for example, which is just something else. To be fair, the series run. It wasn't one every year. In the space between 1987 and the year 2000, there was 8 seasons. Unfortunately, by the time it got to season 8, it lost its way. But its golden seasons are probably 4, 5 and 6. That's not to say 1, 2 and 3 aren't any good at all, because they are. But 4, 5 and 6 are just firing on all cylinders. Some of the ideas are pretty good, where you have basically a droid that goes around wiping people out of existence and putting somebody else in their place, which is a very, very interesting idea, to have sort of judge, jury and executioner, and you have to justify your existence so that it can decide whether it's going to replace you with someone else or whatever. So actually very good. You can, even if you don't like sci-fi, I'd definitely give it a watch, because the characters' chemistry is pretty good. Crichton, Robert Llewellyn did go on to try and they do a US series. Unfortunately, US series didn't quite work. Strangely enough, one of the characters, I can't even pronounce his name, but he's Dr. Julian Bashir in Deep Space Nine, because he was the Rimmer character, I believe, in this US version. But unfortunately, the US version didn't work. This did endure. I'll definitely give it a watch. Patrick Stewart first saw it and thought that it was a rip-off of Star Trek, and then finally very quickly realised, whilst he was going to phone the lawyers, that it wasn't Star Trek at all. It was just, I mean, where else does somebody use a DNA machine and accidentally create a monster out of curry? It's a sort of like an alien style monster out of curry. You just don't really. So yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. I'd say season 8's not great. Season 8, I think, is where it came towards an end and there was a cliffhanger, but season 8 is probably one of the weakest seasons in the original run. I'll definitely recommend it for all ages. Some of the humour's quite light, some of it's a bit, again, silly or dated, because they reference very famous people from the 20th century, but not that much happens, and when they do, it's very strange indeed. But the humour's quite intelligent. There's a whole episode where they end up in a different version of Earth where everything is backwards. It's a very good episode. I would definitely recommend it, because it's just the premise. It's quite a disturbing premise, but it's quite funny at the same time. So I would definitely recommend Red Dwarf. The two main characters are obviously on this cover of this one. You've got Rimmer, and then you've got Dave. Also, you have why does it never show pictures of? It's not very good, but getting closer to doing. There's the full crew there. Also, I need to mention that Holly changes eventually to a woman. Just as bad as the original Holly. This is all to do with the actor that played Holly leaving the show. So it didn't, and it wasn't in a very nice way either. But anyway, that's besides the point. Red Dwarf did have conventions. I'm not sure if they still do, due to the pandemic. But there was a revived season on Dave. The last Red Dwarf in the extended run was made in 2021, or was released in 2021. That's the only one I've not actually seen. So, in all essence, do apologise about that. In all essence, I would recommend Red Dwarf for all ages. It's definitely worth a watch. Maybe even able to start watching it today. It does take, the first season is a bit slow, and the second season can be a bit slow, but some of the story ideas in both seasons are definitely worth a watch, especially when you make self-loathing and ego physical characters. It's quite something in its own right. Please like and subscribe, and please give it a watch. Let me know what you think, or if you've watched this, let me know if I think maybe you've got something incorrect. But thank you very much for watching this video. This is 4046